On a night when thunder rolled across Milwaukee's sky like ancient drums, the St. Mary's Environmental Preservation Center stood as a beacon of scientific dedication amidst the tempest. Rain lashed against the windows of the research facility, where Dr. Weronika Kwiatkowska sat in her office, surrounded by papers detailing the latest findings on endangered species in the region. The soft glow of her desk lamp created a warm bubble of light in the darkness. While lightning occasionally illuminated the room with brilliant flashes, Weronika, a respected ecologist whose reputation had grown alongside her remarkable intuition for animal behavior, felt an inexplicable unease. Something in the air felt different, reminiscent of the stories her grandmother used to tell during stormy nights in their small village near Krakow. Tales of forest guardians and spiritual protectors that, despite her scientific training, had never completely left her consciousness. The security system's warning light began blinking, indicating movement at the main gate. Weronika's first thought was that one of the local deer had wandered too close to the fence again. But when she checked the surveillance feed, her heart nearly stopped. There, illuminated by periodic lightning flashes, stood a magnificent tiger, its dense fur glistening with rain. But what truly caught her attention was what the tiger carried in its mouth, a small cub, held with impossible gentleness. "Tu nie możliwe," she whispered in her native Polish, the words of disbelief escaping involuntarily. Tigers weren't native to Wisconsin. The nearest facility housing big cats was hundreds of miles away, yet here one stood, its eyes reflecting an intelligence that sent shivers down her spine. Without hesitation, Weronika grabbed her rain gear and emergency tranquilizer kit. Not that she intended to use it, but protocol demanded she carry it. As she hurried through the corridors, her mind raced with possibilities. The tiger's appearance felt purposeful, almost supernatural, like the manifestations her grandmother had described in her stories of the old world. As she approached the gate, the rain soaking through her protective gear, Weronika noticed something extraordinary. The tiger's eyes met hers, with an awareness that transcended ordinary animal behavior. There was no aggression, no fear, only a profound sense of purpose. Lightning crackled overhead, illuminating strange markings on the cub's fur that appeared almost like ancient symbols. "I'm here to help," Weronika spoke softly, her voice barely audible above the storm. To her amazement, the tiger's posture relaxed slightly, as if understanding her words. She slowly opened the secondary gate, creating a secure passage to one of the center's protective enclosures. The tiger followed her lead without hesitation, moving with deliberate grace despite its obvious exhaustion. Inside the enclosure, under the shelter of a covered area, the tiger gently set down its precious cargo. The cub, though wet from the journey, appeared unharmed. As Weronika conducted a preliminary visual assessment, she noticed more of the unusual markings on the cub's fur, intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change in the varying light, unlike anything she'd seen in her years of research. The adult tiger, having completed its mission, backed away slightly, but maintained a protective vigil. Veronica quickly provided fresh water and appropriate food for both animals. Her scientific training warring with the growing sense that she was witnessing something beyond ordinary natural phenomena. As she observed them, memories of her grandmother's stories flooded back, tales of the Strajnici, the ancient guardians who appeared in times of great significance. "Babcia," she whispered to herself, "perhaps your stories weren't just legends after all." Later that night, as Veronica made notes in her research journal, she struggled to maintain scientific objectivity. The tiger's behavior defied conventional explanation. Its deliberate seeking of the center, the unusual markings on the cub, the intelligent awareness in its eyes. She knew she needed help understanding this phenomenon, but who could she trust with something so extraordinary? Her thoughts turned to Piotr Vronsky, a folklore expert she'd met at a conference last year. His work on Slavic mythology and natural guardians had seemed academic then, but now... She pulled up his contact information on her computer, knowing that this discovery would require both scientific and cultural expertise to unravel. As the storm continued to rage outside, Veronica cast one last look at the surveillance feed showing the tiger and cub, now resting peacefully. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger than herself, a convergence of science and ancient wisdom that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the natural world. The morning after the mysterious arrival brought no clarity to the extraordinary events at St. Mary's Environmental Preservation Center. Veronica had spent the night in her office. Alternating between monitoring the tigers and researching any similar incidents in scientific literature. She found nothing that could explain a tiger deliberately seeking human assistance in such a manner. The sun had barely risen when Piotr Vronsky arrived, having driven through the night from Chicago after receiving Veronica's urgent call. His appearance matched his reputation, a distinguished man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that sparkled with intellectual curiosity. Despite his academic credentials, Piotr carried himself with the air of someone who had spent considerable time in the field, studying the intersection of nature and folklore. "Dr. Kwiatkowska," he greeted her in Polish, his voice warm with recognition. "Your message intrigued me." "You mentioned markings that reminded you of our old stories." Veronica led him to the observation area overlooking the enclosure. The morning light revealed the tigers more clearly, the adult resting vigilantly while the cub explored its surroundings. When Piotr saw the markings on the cub's fur, he inhaled sharply, his professional composure momentarily slipping. "Impossible," he whispered, quickly pulling out a worn leather notebook from his satchel. He flipped through pages filled with hand-drawn symbols and notations until he found what he was looking for. These patterns, they match ancient Slavic protection symbols. Look here. He showed Veronica drawings that indeed mirrored the strange markings on the cub's fur. In our oldest stories, Piotr continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller, there are tales of the Obronka Światła, the protector of light. A spiritual guardian that appears when the balance between humanity and nature reaches a critical point. The legends say it takes different forms, but always brings with it a sign of renewal. As if responding to Piotr's words, the cub approached the observation window, its unusual markings seeming to shimmer in the morning light. The adult tiger watched attentively, its intense gaze following their every movement. "But these are just stories," Veronica said. Her scientific mind struggling with the implications, folklore created to explain natural phenomena. Piotr smiled gently. Science and spirituality weren't always separate, Veronica. Our ancestors understood things we've forgotten. Look at how the adult tiger behaves, not like a wild animal, but like a guardian with a purpose. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Tomasz Sobczak, the center's leading geneticist. His presence was imposing, tall and analytical, with the precise movements of someone used to working with delicate equipment. He regarded Piotr with barely concealed skepticism. "Dr. Kwiatkowska, I received your report about our unusual visitors," he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "I'd like to run some tests on the cub, standard procedures to ensure its health and perhaps identify its subspecies." As the three specialists observed the tigers, the cub began performing a series of movements that seemed almost ritualistic, following a pattern that matched some of the drawings in Piotr's notebook. The adult tiger watched calmly, as if overseeing an important lesson. "Remarkable," Piotr murmured, quickly sketching the sequence. "These movements, they're described in ancient texts as part of purification ceremonies. But how could a cub know them?" Dr. Sobczak frowned. His scientific worldview clearly challenged by what he was witnessing. There must be a rational explanation, perhaps learned behavior from its mother. "The adult tiger is male," Veronica pointed out quietly, adding another layer to the mystery. As they debated the implications of their observations, none of them noticed a figure watching from the parking lot. Jan Kowalik, who had followed Piotr from Chicago. His interest piqued by rumors of something extraordinary at the center. His calculating gaze took in the security layout and personnel movements, while his mind worked on ways to exploit this unexpected opportunity. The morning sun continued to rise, illuminating the unusual markings on the cub's fur in a way that made them appear to be moving, like living symbols carrying an ancient message. Veronica felt caught between two worlds, her scientific training and the undeniable magic unfolding before her eyes. She realized that understanding this mystery would require both Piotr's knowledge of ancient wisdom and Dr. Sobczak's scientific expertise. Dr. Sobczak's laboratory hummed with the gentle whir of sophisticated equipment as he studied the results of the cub's preliminary examinations. The genetic analysis displayed on his computer screen defied conventional understanding. The DNA sequences showed markers of an ancient taiga subspecies long believed to have vanished from Earth. "This is unprecedented," he muttered, removing his glasses to rub his tired eyes. The past 24 hours had pushed the boundaries of his strictly empirical worldview. Beside him, Veronica and Piotr leaned forward, studying the complex charts and data streams. "Look at this genetic marker." Dr. Sobchak pointed to a particular sequence. "It shows characteristics we've only seen in fossilized remains dating back thousands of years. It's as if we're looking at a living specimen of an ancient lineage that somehow survived unchanged." Piotr pulled out his notebook, comparing the genetic patterns to his sketches of ancient symbols. "The similarity is remarkable," he observed. "These genetic sequences they mirror the pattern of sacred markings found in old Slavic temples dedicated to nature spirits." As if responding to their discussion, the monitoring screen showing the enclosure captured the cub performing another series of those peculiar, ritualistic movements. The adult tiger sat regally nearby, its eyes reflecting an almost supernatural awareness. "There's something else," Veronica added, pulling up her own research notes. "I've been recording the cub's movements." "They occur precisely at dawn and dusk, following the same pattern described in ancient texts about the Obronka Światła ritual." While they discussed these findings, the center's security system registered a new visitor, Jan Kowalik, presenting himself at the front desk with impeccable credentials as an environmental activist and rare species advocate. His expensive suit and polished manner exuded professionalism, masking his true intentions. "Now, I heard about your extraordinary discovery." Kowalik smiled smoothly as he was introduced to the team. "Such a unique specimen must be properly documented and preserved." Something in his tone made Veronica uneasy, though she couldn't quite explain why. The adult tiger's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. As Kowalik approached the observation area, the magnificent creature's demeanor changed, its eyes tracking the visitor with obvious distrust. The cub, previously engaged in its mysterious movements, quickly retreated to the safety of its guardian's side. "Fascinating defensive behavior," Dr. Sobchak noted, recording the interaction, almost as if the tiger senses his intentions. Piotr finished quietly, exchanging a meaningful look with Veronica. Later that afternoon, as storm clouds gathered again over Milwaukee, Piotr shared more of his research with Veronica in the privacy of her office. Doom. The legends speak of a time when the boundary between the natural and spiritual worlds would thin, he explained, showing her ancient manuscripts. The Protector would appear, bringing with it a child of two worlds, one that could bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern understanding. Thunder rolled overhead as Veronica considered the implications. The cub's unusual markings, its ritualistic behaviors. The genetic anomalies, everything pointed to something beyond scientific explanation. Yet here was Dr. Sobchak finding tangible, measurable evidence of its uniqueness. In the enclosure, the cub had begun another series of movements, more complex than before. This time, the patterns it traced seemed to make the very air shimmer, creating subtle waves of energy that their monitoring equipment registered as unexplainable electromagnetic fluctuations. "We need to protect them," Veronica said firmly, watching Koalik's retreating figure through her office window. "Something tells me we've only scratched the surface of what's really happening here." As if in response to her words, the adult tiger lifted its head and let out a soft, resonant sound, not quite a roar, but something more melodic, almost like the ancient chants Piotr had described in his research. The cub's markings seemed to pulse in harmony with the sound. Creating a mesmerizing display that left even the skeptical Dr. Sobczak speechless. The storm intensified outside, but within the center, a different kind of energy was building. A convergence of scientific discovery and ancient magic that would soon challenge everything they thought they knew about the natural world. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, Jan Kowalik was making his own plans, unaware that he was dealing with forces far beyond his understanding. That night, Veronica experienced something extraordinary. In her dreams, she found herself walking through an ancient forest she had never seen before, yet somehow recognized. The trees seemed to whisper in an old Slavic dialect she barely remembered from her grandmother's stories. As she moved deeper into this mystical woodland, the cub's markings appeared in the air around her, glowing with an inner light and forming patterns that seemed to tell a story. She awoke with a start in her office, where she had dozed off while reviewing Dr. Sobczak's latest findings. The dream felt more like a memory, or perhaps a message. Without hesitation, she began sketching what she had seen, her hand moving almost of its own accord. The resulting drawings matched perfectly with several unidentified symbols in Piotr's research. "These markings," Piotr exclaimed when she showed him the sketches the next morning. They're described in a rare manuscript I found in a monastery near Krakow. They're said to appear when the Obronka Światła chooses a human guardian to help protect its charge. Dr. Sobczak, who had been quietly observing their discussion while analyzing new data, spoke up. "While I'm not one to embrace supernatural explanations, I must admit that our latest tests show something remarkable. The cub's cellular structure appears to be adapting and evolving in ways I've never seen before. It's as if its very DNA is responding to some external force we can't measure." The three of them stood before the enclosure, watching as the cub performed its morning ritual. This time, something was different. As the young creature moved, the air around it seemed to shimmer with a subtle iridescence, and the adult tiger joined in, moving in perfect synchronization. Their movements created patterns that exactly matched the symbols from Weronika's dream. "The equipment is picking up unusual energy readings," Dr. Sobczak noted, checking his instruments. "Similar to the electromagnetic fluctuations we detected earlier, but stronger and more coherent. It's almost like they're trying to communicate," Veronica finished, feeling a deep connection to what was unfolding before them. Meanwhile, in another part of the center, Yankovic was carefully implementing his plan. He had managed to gain access to restricted areas by charming the administrative staff with his seemingly genuine interest in conservation. What they didn't know was that he had already contacted potential buyers, collectors who would pay astronomical sums for a creature as unique as this cub. However, as Kowalik attempted to get closer to the enclosure for detailed photographs, the adult tiger's behavior became increasingly alert. Each time he approached, the tiger would position itself between him and the cub, its eyes gleaming with ancient wisdom and warning. That afternoon, Veronica experienced another vision, this time while wide awake. As she watched the cub, the world around her seemed to shift, and she saw glimpses of ancient forests and ceremonies, of people working in harmony with powerful natural spirits. She saw the role of the Obronka Światła through the ages, appearing in times of need to restore balance between humanity and nature. The festival, she suddenly announced to Piotr and Dr. Sobczak, the Polish Cultural Festival next week, that's when everything will align. The manuscripts speak of celestial alignments and gatherings of believers, don't they, Piotr? Piotr quickly consulted his notes. Yes. And this year's festival falls exactly on an ancient date of power. The summer solstice aligns perfectly with traditional ceremonies of renewal. Dr. Sobczak, despite his scientific skepticism, had been transformed by what he'd witnessed. Perhaps we could combine our approaches, he suggested. The festival could provide cover for more extensive readings of the energy patterns we've been detecting. While also allowing for the traditional ceremonies Piotr believes are important. As they discussed plans for the festival, the cub's markings began to glow more intensely than ever before, creating patterns of light that danced across the walls of the enclosure. The adult tiger watched them with approval, as if their collaboration was exactly what it had been waiting for. In the growing dusk, Veronica felt another wave of vision wash over her. This time, she saw the festival grounds transformed into a place of power where science and ancient wisdom would merge to protect something precious. But she also saw shadows lurking at the edges of her vision, threats that would need to be overcome before their task could be completed. The week before the Polish Cultural Festival transformed the St. Mary's Environmental Preservation Center into a hub of feverish activity. Veronica, Piotr, and Dr. Sobczak worked tirelessly to coordinate their dual approaches to protecting the mysterious cubs. The usually quiet research facility now buzzed with an energy that seemed to resonate with the increasingly frequent light displays emanating from the cubs' enclosure. Dr. Sobczak had converted an entire laboratory into a monitoring station, filling it with sophisticated equipment designed to measure the strange energy patterns they'd been observing. "Oh, these readings are unprecedented," he explained to his colleagues, pointing to a series of complex graphs. The energy signatures we're detecting share characteristics with both electromagnetic fields and something else entirely. Something our instruments can't quite classify. Piotr, meanwhile, had been consulting with local Polish community elders about traditional ceremonies. Many of them have been having dreams, he revealed during a morning meeting. Dreams of ancient forests and spiritual guardians. They don't know about our visitors, yet they speak of signs that align perfectly with the legends of the Obronka Światła. The festival preparations provided perfect cover for their more esoteric arrangements, while local community members set up traditional food stalls and craft displays. Weronika and her team carefully embedded Piotr's protective symbols throughout the festival grounds. Dr. Sobczak disguised his monitoring equipment as modern art installations, creating a seamless blend of science and tradition. The cub's behavior had also evolved dramatically. Its morning and evening rituals had become more elaborate, and the markings on its fur now seemed to shift and flow like liquid light. The adult tiger maintained its vigilant watch, but appeared increasingly focused on Weronika, as if recognizing her growing connection to their mission. During a particularly intense ritual, Weronika experienced her strongest vision yet. She saw the festival grounds as they would be, but overlaid with lines of ancient power, ley lines that her grandmother had once spoken about. The vision showed her exactly where the protective circle needed to be established, where the elders should stand, and where Dr. Sobczak's equipment would pick up the strongest readings. The vision also showed me this, she said. Sketching quickly in Piotr's notebook, the drawing revealed a complex pattern of interconnected symbols, similar to the markings on the cub, but with subtle variations. I believe it's a protection ritual, but it combines elements of both ancient wisdom and modern understanding. Dr. Sobczak studied the pattern with growing excitement. These formations, they match the energy wave patterns we've been recording from the cub. It's as if the ancient symbols are a physical representation of actual energy fields we can measure. However, their preparations didn't go unnoticed. Jan Kowalik had been methodically gathering information, taking advantage of the increased activity to move more freely through the facility. His carefully crafted persona as an enthusiastic conservationist had won him the trust of several staff members. Giving him access to valuable details about security protocols and schedules. One afternoon, as Weronika was reviewing security arrangements with the festival committee, she felt a sudden chill. Looking up, she caught Kowalik studying the facility's blueprints with unusual intensity. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, she felt the same sense of warning she'd experienced in her visions. The adult tiger had also grown more restless. Particularly when Kowalik was near. During one of his routine visits to the research area, the magnificent creature had begun performing its own ritual. one that made the air crackle with protective energy and caused all of Dr. Sobchak's instruments to spike dramatically. "It's preparing for something," Pyotr observed, comparing the tiger's movements to ancient descriptions in his texts. The legends speak of a convergence, a moment when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds becomes thin enough for ancient powers to fully manifest. As the festival drew nearer, strange phenomena began occurring throughout the center. Staff members reported seeing ghostly lights in the corridors at night, and the local wildlife behaved unusually. Birds gathered in perfect circles around the facility, and deer stood sentinel-like at its boundaries. The very air seemed charged with anticipation. In her office late one night, Weronika received an unexpected visit from one of the Polish community elders, a woman who reminded her strongly of her grandmother. "The old powers are stirring," the elder said without preamble. "We haven't felt anything like this since the old country. You must be prepared for what's coming." The first day of the Polish Cultural Festival dawned with an otherworldly quality to the air. A fine mist covered the grounds of St. Mary's Environmental Preservation Center, and within it, observers could have sworn they saw shapes and symbols forming and dissolving. The cub's markings had begun pulsing with an inner light that grew stronger with each passing hour, visible even through the facility's specially designed observation windows. Dr. Sobchak's monitoring equipment was recording unprecedented levels of activity. "The energy signatures are harmonizing," he explained to Weronika and Pyotr, pointing to his displays. "It's as if multiple frequencies are aligning themselves into a single, powerful wavelength. Look at how it corresponds with the traditional symbols in Pyotr's research." The festival grounds had been transformed into a vibrant celebration of Polish culture. Colorful stands displayed traditional crafts, the air filled with the aroma of pierogi and kielbasa. And the sound of folk music mixed with excited conversations in both English and Polish. But beneath this festive atmosphere, a more profound transformation was taking place. The elders Pyotr had consulted had positioned themselves at specific points around the grounds, exactly where Weronika's visions had indicated. Each wore traditional garments adorned with protective symbols that matched the cub's markings. As they took their positions, the mist seemed to swirl around them with purpose. "The ancient texts speak of this," Pyotr said quietly to Weronika as they observed the gathering. "When the guardians align, when the old wisdom meets new understanding, a gateway opens for renewal and transformation." Inside the center, the adult tiger had begun a new ritual, more elaborate than any before. Its movements were precisely coordinated with the cub Z, creating patterns of energy that Dr. Sobchak's instruments recorded as complex, interwoven fields of force. The air within the enclosure shimmered with visible waves of power. However, Jan Kowalik was also making his final preparations. His carefully constructed facade of environmental concern had given him access to critical areas of the facility. Through seemingly casual conversations, he had gathered intelligence about security protocols, staff rotations, and the layout of restricted areas. Now, he moved through the festival crowd with practiced ease, his expensive camera equipment concealing more sinister tools. Veronica felt his presence like a discord in the harmonious energy building around them. The adult tiger's behavior confirmed her suspicions. Every time Koalik approached the research wing, the magnificent creature would pause in its ritual to track his movements, its eyes glowing with ancient warning. As the afternoon progressed, the festival's traditional dancing began. The performers had been carefully chosen and positioned according to both Piotr's knowledge of ancient ceremonies and Dr. Sobchak's electromagnetic surveys. As they moved in their circular patterns, something extraordinary happened. Their traditional steps began creating visible ripples in the misty air, echoing the energy patterns emanating from the cub's enclosure. "The resonance is building," Dr. Sobchak announced. His scientific skepticism completely forgotten as he watched his instruments record something that should have been impossible. The dance patterns are somehow amplifying the energy signatures we've been tracking. Veronica experienced another vision, more vivid than any before. She saw the festival grounds as they truly were, not just a cultural celebration, but a gathering of power that had been carefully orchestrated by forces beyond their understanding. The dancers weren't just performing steps, they were weaving a complex web of protection and power. In her vision, she also saw Kowalik's true nature, a dark void in the tapestry of light and energy being created around them. She watched as he moved through the crowd, his presence creating subtle disturbances in the protective patterns they had worked so hard to establish. The elder who had visited Veronica appeared at her side. Speaking in a voice that seemed to carry ancient wisdom, "The convergence approaches. The Protector has chosen this place, this moment, for a reason, but the shadows that seek to disturb the balance are gathering their strength as well." As if in response to these words, the cub's markings blazed with sudden intensity, and the adult tiger let out a sound that was part roar, part musical note. The sound rippled through the festival grounds. Causing the mist to swirl into recognizable patterns, the same symbols that had appeared in Veronica's dreams, now manifesting in the physical world. The festival had reached its peak as the sun began its descent towards the horizon. The combination of traditional dances, ancient ceremonies, and the increasingly visible manifestations of energy had created an atmosphere thick with anticipation. The mist that had covered the grounds all day now moved with clear purpose. Forming protective circles around key areas of the facility, Veronica, stationed near the research wing, felt the change in the air immediately when Koalik made his move. Under the cover of an especially energetic folk dance performance, he had slipped away from the main festival area, making his way towards the secure entrance to the animal enclosures. His movements were practiced and precise. revealing a level of professional infiltration skills that confirmed their worst suspicions. The adult tiger, however, was ready. As Koalik approached the security door, the magnificent creature began a new ritual, one that sent pulses of visible energy through the facility's corridors. Dr. Sobchak's monitors exploded with activity, their displays showing patterns that defied conventional physics. "These readings," he called out over their secure communication system, "they're creating some kind of interference field. It's affecting all electronic systems in the vicinity." Indeed, Koalik found his electronic bypass devices malfunctioning, their circuits overloaded by the supernatural energy filling the air. The cub, meanwhile, had positioned itself in the center of its enclosure, its markings glowing with an intensity that made it difficult to look at directly. The symbols on its fur were now clearly visible. Rotating and shifting in complex patterns that matched the movements of the festival dancers outside, Piotr, who had been consulting with the elders, rushed to join Veronika. "The legends speak of this," he said, breathless with excitement and concern. "When the Protector reveals its power, it creates a shield of pure energy, a combination of natural forces and ancient magic that modern technology cannot penetrate." The elders had begun chanting. Their voices carrying across the festival grounds in an old Slavic dialect that few could understand, but everyone felt in their bones. The traditional dancers, without being instructed, adjusted their movements to align with the chanting, creating complex geometric patterns that mirrored the cub's markings. Veronika felt another vision wash over her, but this time she remained fully aware of her surroundings. She could see both the physical world and the flows of energy that connected everything: the dancers, the elders, the tigers, and even the land itself. In this enhanced state of perception, she watched as Koalik's dark presence attempted to push against the growing web of protective forces. Dr. Sobchak, monitoring everything from his lab, provided a running commentary of the phenomenal readings he was receiving. And do the energy patterns are organizing themselves into some kind of coherent field. It's as if the entire facility is being enveloped in a protective bubble of energy that operates on principles we've never encountered before. The adult tiger's eyes had begun to glow with the same light as the cub's markings, and as Koalik made another attempt to breach the security systems, the magnificent creature let out a sound that was more than a roar. It was a call to the ancient powers that had begun to manifest around them. The very air seemed to crystallize for a moment, and Koalik found himself pushed back by an invisible force. The Polish community elders had formed a circle now, their chanting growing stronger. Each elder held a traditional artifact, pieces of amber, old medallions. Hand-carved wooden figures, and these objects had begun to glow with the same light as the cub's markings. The connections between old and new, between science and spirituality, were becoming visible to everyone present. Veronika understood now why she had been chosen as a bridge between worlds. Her scientific training, and her connection to the old ways allowed her to see how everything was connected. The festival wasn't just a celebration, it was a catalyst for something much more significant. As the sun touched the horizon, the cub began a new series of movements, more complex and purposeful than anything they had seen before. The adult tiger joined in, and together they created patterns of light and energy that formed a visible barrier around the entire facility. Dr. Sobczak's instruments recorded power levels that should have been impossible, yet here they were. Measurable and real, the evening sky above St. Mary's Environmental Preservation Center had become an extraordinary spectacle. The northern lights, completely unusual for Milwaukee's latitude, danced in shades of blue and green, their patterns mysteriously matching the symbols on the cub's fur. Dr. Sobczak's instruments were recording unprecedented levels of electromagnetic activity, while the traditional dancers and elders maintained their intricate ceremonies below. Kowalik, having failed in his direct approach, had quickly adapted his strategy. He emerged from the shadows now, no longer hiding his true nature, dressed in black tactical gear and speaking urgently into a concealed communication device. "The package is secured by unknown forces," he murmured to his unseen associates. "Initiating Protocol Omega." Within minutes, several unmarked vehicles appeared at the festival's perimeter. Men in civilian clothes began moving through the crowd, their practiced movements betraying their professional training. Kowalik had revealed his trump card, a private security team experienced in acquiring rare specimens for wealthy collectors. However, the protective energies surrounding the center had reached new levels of manifestation. The cub, sensing the approaching threat, began a series of movements that caused its markings to pulse with blinding intensity. The adult tiger, positioned at the heart of the enclosure, lifted its head and released a sound that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions, part physical roar, part spiritual resonance. Dr. Sobczak burst into Weronika's office, his usually composed demeanor transformed by excitement. The energy signatures we're recording, they're creating some kind of quantum entanglement effect. The traditional ceremonies and the tiger's energy patterns are synchronizing in ways that defy our understanding of physics. Piotr, who had been consulting with the eldest members of the Polish community, rushed in with his own revelation. And the elders say this is the convergence the ancient texts spoke of, when the barriers between the physical and spiritual realms become permeable enough for the old powers to fully manifest. The festival grounds had become a swirling vortex of visible energy patterns. The traditional dancers, moving in perfect synchronization with the cub's ritual, created geometric patterns of light that spread across the ground like living symbols. The elders' chanting had taken on a harmonic quality that seemed to resonate with the very air itself. Weronika, standing at the intersection of all these forces, experienced her most powerful vision yet. But this time, Instead of seeing glimpses of ancient forests or future events, she saw the present moment in its true form. The complex web of energies, the connection between the dancers and the tigers. The way modern science and ancient wisdom were weaving together, it all became crystal clear. "It's not just about protecting the cub," she announced, her voice carrying a newfound authority. "This is about restoring balance, creating a bridge between our modern understanding and the ancient powers that have always been part of our world." The adult tiger's eyes met hers across the distance, confirming her revelation. The magnificent creature began a new movement sequence. One that caused the air around the facility to shimmer with waves of protective energy. The cub, following its guardian's lead, added its own patterns to the emerging tapestry of light and power. Kowalik's team found themselves facing an impossible barrier. Every attempt to approach the facility was met with an invisible force that gently but firmly pushed them back. Their electronic equipment malfunctioned, compasses spun wildly. And GPS systems displayed impossible readings. The Polish elders had formed 3 concentric circles now, their chanting creating audible harmonies that matched the frequency patterns on Dr. Sobczak's instruments. Traditional artifacts held by the elders, ancient amber pieces, carved wooden talismans, and family heirlooms, began to glow with the same light as the cub's markings. In this moment of perfect convergence, even the most skeptical festival attendees could no longer deny the extraordinary nature of what they were witnessing. The barrier between ordinary reality and the realm of ancient powers had become thin enough for everyone to perceive the magical energies that had always existed alongside their modern world. The night had reached its pivotal moment. The festival grounds of St. Mary's Environmental Preservation Center had become a nexus of extraordinary power. Where the boundaries between science and spirituality, modern and ancient, visible and invisible, had dissolved into a singular, harmonious force. The northern lights above had intensified, forming a spiral pattern that seemed to focus directly on the center. Kowalik, realizing his conventional methods had failed, revealed his final desperate gambit. From one of the unmarked vehicles, his team produced ancient artifacts stolen from Eastern European museums, dark objects that seemed to absorb the light around them. "If we can't break through their barrier," he announced with cold determination, "we'll disrupt the energy patterns themselves." But the moment Kowalik's team attempted to activate these corrupted artifacts, the true purpose of the Obronka Światła revealed itself. The cub, its markings now pulsing with blinding intensity, began a transformation that left everyone breathless. The symbols on its fur separated from its body, floating in the air like living constellations, each one matching a pattern being created by the festival dancers below. Dr. Sobczak's monitoring equipment captured something extraordinary. "The energy patterns," he exclaimed, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. They're not just protective barriers, they're a template for harmony between natural and human-made systems. The frequencies are creating a sustainable resonance pattern. The adult tiger, standing majestically in the center of the enclosure, let out a sound that seemed to contain all the wisdom of ages. The sound rippled through the air, transforming the stolen artifacts in Kowalik's possession into harmless dust. The dark objects simply dissolved. Their negative energy completely neutralized by the pure force of the Protector's power. Veronica, experiencing the clearest vision of her life, finally understood the complete truth. The Obronka Światła didn't come here just to be protected, she announced, her voice carrying across the grounds with supernatural clarity. It came to teach us how to restore balance, to show us how science and ancient wisdom can work together to heal our world. The elders still maintaining their concentric circles, began a new chant. This one was different, not a protective spell or a banishing ritual, but a song of integration and renewal. As they sang, the visible energy patterns began to stabilize, creating a permanent matrix of harmony that extended far beyond the center's boundaries. Dr. Sobczak's instruments recorded something unprecedented. The energy field was actually regenerating damaged ecosystems in the surrounding area. Plants grew stronger, water became clearer, and the air itself seemed to purify. The cub's sacred markings had become a blueprint for environmental restoration, bridging the gap between technological advancement and natural balance. Kowalik, witnessing his plans crumble, experienced an unexpected transformation of his own. The pure energy surrounding him began to affect his consciousness, stripping away years of greed and disconnection from nature. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the sudden understanding of what he had almost destroyed. The festival participants, moved by the power of the moment, spontaneously joined the elders' chant. Their voices created a harmony that matched the frequency patterns showing on Dr. Sobczak's monitors perfectly. Modern instruments and ancient songs had become one unified force for positive change. Piotr, consulting his oldest manuscripts, found references to this exact moment. The convergence is not just a single event, he translated with growing excitement. It's the beginning of a new era of cooperation between human innovation and natural wisdom. The Obronka Światła appears not to fight darkness, but to illuminate the path forward. The cub and the adult tiger began moving in perfect synchronization, their combined energy creating visible ripples in the fabric of reality. These ripples carried seeds of restoration and renewal, teaching all who witnessed them how to maintain the delicate balance between progress and preservation. As the night reached its zenith, the northern lights above formed a perfect replica of the cub's sacred markings across the entire sky. Milwaukee had become a beacon of hope, a living example of how ancient wisdom and modern understanding could work together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. One year after the extraordinary events at St. Mary's Environmental Preservation Center, the facility had transformed into something far beyond its original scope. The center had become a global beacon for the integration of scientific research and traditional ecological wisdom, drawing visitors and researchers from around the world who sought to understand the miracle that had occurred that fateful night. Dr. Sobczak's laboratory now expanded into an entire wing. Hosted state-of-the-art equipment that continuously monitored the unique energy patterns that still emanated from the grounds. The data collected had revolutionized multiple fields of study, from quantum physics to environmental science. His papers on the harmonic integration theory had sparked a new movement in the scientific community, one that acknowledged the importance of including traditional wisdom in modern research. Adi, what we witnessed wasn't just a supernatural event, he explained to a group of visiting scientists, but a demonstration of natural laws we're only beginning to understand. The energy patterns we recorded that night have provided a blueprint for environmental restoration technologies that work in perfect harmony with nature's own systems. Veronica had embraced her role as a bridge between worlds. The visions that began during the convergence had become a constant gift. Allowing her to perceive the delicate balance between natural and human-made systems. Under her guidance, the center had developed new conservation methods that combined cutting-edge technology with ancient environmental practices. The cub, no longer small but not yet fully grown, had remained at the center with its guardian. Their presence continued to generate the harmonious energy that had transformed the region, but now in a subtle, sustainable way that nourished the land and its inhabitants. The mysterious markings on its fur had become less dramatic, but more intricate, shifting with the seasons and responding to the Earth's natural cycles. Piotr had established an institute within the center, dedicated to preserving and studying ecological wisdom from cultures around the world. The library he created housed not only ancient texts and traditional knowledge, but also the latest scientific research. Creating a living repository of integrated environmental understanding. The old stories weren't just myths, he would say during his popular lectures. They were guidelines for maintaining balance with nature, passed down through generations. Now we can understand them both spiritually and scientifically, thanks to what the Obronka Światła revealed to us. The Polish Cultural Festival had evolved into an annual international symposium for environmental harmony, where scientists, traditional knowledge keepers, and environmental experts from around the globe gathered to share insights and innovations. The dancing and ceremonies continued, now understood as sophisticated methods for maintaining environmental balance through community participation. Perhaps most remarkably, Jan Kołalik had become one of the center's most devoted advocates. His transformation that night had been complete and lasting. He now used his international connections to protect endangered species and preserve traditional ecological knowledge, working tirelessly to repair the damage he had once caused. The adult tiger, still magnificent and wise, had become a symbol of the guardian spirit that exists in all of nature. While it maintained its protective watch over the cub, It also seemed to be teaching everyone at the center about the profound connection between all living things. Its presence reminded them that the greatest mysteries of the natural world could be understood through both scientific observation and spiritual wisdom. As Milwaukee's seasons turned, the center flourished as a living example of what humanity could achieve when ancient wisdom and modern knowledge worked in harmony. The northern lights that had appeared during the convergence now manifested regularly over the center. Their patterns matching the ongoing dance between tradition and innovation, science and spirituality, human and natural worlds. The Obronka Światła had indeed fulfilled its purpose, not just to protect and preserve, but to teach humanity how to move forward in balance with the natural world. The mysterious markings that had first appeared on the cub were now understood as a universal language of environmental harmony. One that continued to reveal new insights as humanity learned to better understand its place in the natural order. And so, the legacy of that extraordinary night lived on, not as a single moment of miraculous intervention, but as a continuing journey of discovery and integration. The light of understanding that had been kindled continued to grow, spreading from the center outward, touching lives and transforming perspectives across the globe. Proving that when humanity opens itself to both ancient wisdom and new discoveries, miraculous things become possible. Dear viewers, we hope this tale of transformation at St. Mary's Environmental Preservation Center has touched your hearts and opened your minds to new possibilities. If you've been moved by this story of harmony between science and spirit, nature and humanity, we invite you to join our community of storytellers and seekers. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring narratives that explore the magical boundaries between the known and the unknown. Share your own stories of transformation in the comments below. And don't forget to leave a like if this journey has sparked something special in your heart. Remember, every great story needs viewers like you to keep its light burning bright. Until our next tale, may you find magic in the balance between old wisdom and new discoveries.